We have started with the chapter The Enemy by Pearl S. Buck, and I have already given you a brief introduction to the author and a detailed summary of the chapter. Children, today I will be beginning with the line by line explanation of the chapter. So listen to the explanation very carefully. Let's read the chapter now. Now, before you read, it is the time of the World War. An American prisoner of war is washed ashore in a dying state and is found at the doorstep of a Japanese doctor. Should he save him as a doctor or hand him over to the army as a patriot? Now, children, the last line, it throws light on the inner conflict that the protagonist, Dr. Sadao Hoki, was facing. Now, I have already told you that the story, it is set during the World War II, and the Japanese troops, they were returning with the captured American soldiers. Now, one of them happened to flee, and in a dying state, he reached the doorstep of this Japanese doctor. Now, should he save his life as a doctor or hand him over to the Japanese army and fulfill his duty towards his nation? Now, this was the dilemma, that the tug of war that was going on inside Sadao. So let us read now. Dr. Sadao Hoki's house was built on a spot of the Japanese coast here. As a little boy, he had often played. Now, if you could see, children, in the image, a stone, the house, it is made up of a square stone house. So this is the shape, a square stone house, and situated at the shore of the sea. The low square stone house was set upon rocks well above a narrow beach. So it's a beach and you can see the sea, and from there the prisoner of war had escaped from the ship, and somehow in that dying state he had reached the doorsteps of Dr. Sadao Hoki. Now, here in these lines we have been introduced to the childhood days of Dr. Sadao. So he had spent his life as a little boy and he had often played at this Japanese coast. The low square stone house was set upon rocks well above a narrow beach and was outlined with bent pines. Children, the pine trees, they grow on the beach and they are arranged in a line. So it's a proper arrangement, and these pine trees, they grow on the shore. As a boy, Sadao had climbed the pines, supporting himself on his bare feet, as he had seen men do in the South Seas when they climbed for coconuts. Okay, so he knew how to climb these pine trees. He knew how to support oneself while climbing the trees with the bare feet. And from where did he learn? He had learned this art from the men, because he had observed the men climb these pine trees, so in the South Seas, and hence he had learned this art of climbing these pine trees. His father had taken him often to the islands of those seas, and never had he failed to say to the little brave boy at his side, "Those islands yonder, they are the stepping stones to the future of Japan." And what did he always tell little Sadao? That you can see those islands yonder over there, they are the stepping stones to the future for Japan. Means what? That one day those islands will be our territory. They will be our land. "Where shall we step from them?" Sadao had asked seriously. And then Sadao very innocently posed a question to the father, that, "Father, once we reach there, those islands, then where next? Where shall we go next from there?" "Who knows?" his father had answered. Who can limit our future? It depends on what we make of it. Please underline, children, very, very important line. Now, the father, he gave a very vague and abstract answer. He did not give a direct answer to the little boy's question. And little boys, they can understand in concrete terms. That time, this answer was not very clear to Sadao, who was a child. His father, what he meant, it had a deep meaning. The father said that who knows where our future lies, isn't it? It all depends on what we make of it. So man shapes his own future, his own destiny. So this was a very deep message that the father gave to little Sadao. Sadao had taken this into his mind as he did everything his father said. His father, who never joked or played with him, but who spent infinite pains upon him, who was his only son. Now the father, children, he was a strict disciplinarian. He never cracked jokes. He never, engaged in some light-hearted talks with the son. And he never even played with him, but had taken infinite means a lot of pain upon his only son. So he was bringing little Sadao up with utmost care, okay, teaching him the values of life, teaching him how one should lead a disciplined life. So all these values and these lessons of life, little Sadao was picking up from his father. Sadao knew that his education was his father's chief concern. Please underline, children. Anything can come as a question in your MCQ. So Sadao knew that his education was his father's chief concern. For this reason, he had been sent at 22 to America to learn all that could be learned of surgery and medicine. Now, for the father, the education of the child, of Sadao, of his only son, was of utmost concern. So, at an age of 22, the father sent his son to America to study surgery and medicine. He had come back at 30, and before his father died, he had seen Sadao become famous not only as a surgeon but as a scientist. See, the father's dream had finally come true. Before his death, he could see his son become a successful surgeon as well as a scientist. Because he was perfecting a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean, he had not been sent abroad with the troops. Okay. Now, children, because he was a scientist too, Sadao, he was working on a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean. That means if one receives a wound mark, often the scars are left, right? But then he was working on a discovery. He was perfecting a discovery so that there are no scars left. The wound would be entirely clean on that spot. He had not been sent abroad, and because he was perfecting and working on this discovery, the orders were that he would not be sent abroad with the warring soldiers, with the warring soldiers. Also, he knew there was some slight danger that the old general, we had talked about General Takima, children. Also, there was a slight danger that the old General Takima might need an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically. The general, he was unwell. He was undergoing treatment, and for this reason too, Sadao was not sent abroad. He was asked to stay back because the doctor could need an operation any moment. And for this possibility, Sadao was being kept in Japan. So there were two reasons, children, why Sadao was kept in Japan. First being that he was perfecting a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean, and the second was that the old general might have needed an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically. So these are the two reasons. If it comes as a question, children, for 2 marks, you will be writing down these two reasons. Let's move on to the next slide now. Let's read the description, children, now. Clouds were rising from the ocean. The unexpected warmth of the past few days had at night drawn heavy fog from the cold waves. So it was foggy and there was mist also. Sadao watched mists hide outlines of a little island near the shore and then some creeping up the beach below the house. Now somebody came creeping up the beach below his house. So nothing was very clear. Why? Because there was a heavy fog and there was mist. What is mist, children? You know, when tiny droplets of water, they hang in the air. Again, you know, it makes the environment very unclear. You cannot see clearly what is in front of you. So the fog, the mist, it was hiding everything from view. Nothing could be clearly seen. Only the outlines of a little island at the shore, near the shore, could be made out. And then he could see someone creeping up the beach. Creeping means, children, he was not walking straight, but you know, with the help of his legs, he was pulling himself and he was creeping. And someone reached below the house, wreathing around the pines. Wreathing around the pines means, children, he was covered. Again, he got concealed, he got hidden, he got wrapped. Or here it will be, he was hidden because of the pine trees. So nothing was clear, but he could make out that something is creeping and has reached below the house. In a few minutes, fog would be wrapped about the house too. Now, because the house was situated on the shore, children, Sadao was sure that the house would be now engulfed in fog in a few minutes. Then he would go into the room where Hannah, his wife, would be waiting for him with the two children. And then he thought that he would retire to bed with his wife and two children. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. But at this moment, the door opened and she looked out. A dark blue woolen houri over her kimono. Now this is the traditional dress, children. It's, you know, just to keep the cold away. Over the kimono, the long loose gown worn by the Japanese. So over it, he wore a woolen houri. She came to him affectionately and put her arm through his as he stood. So the couple, they were now spending a little loving moments with each other. They were being cozy with each other. They smiled and said nothing. So both of them were standing and they were enjoying the view of the sea and they were also enjoying the mist and the fog. He had met Hannah in America. Now here their love story begins, children. This is a detailed description of the love affair that started between Hannah and Dr. Sadao. So where did he meet Hannah? He had met Hannah in America, but he had waited to fall in love with her until he was sure that she was Japanese. And why so? Because the father, it has already been told, children, that he was a man deeply rooted in culture and custom and tradition, right? So the son, he could not go against the wishes of the father. Moreover, he was the only son, so he couldn't hurt his father. So he waited to fall in love with Hannah after he had assured himself that yes, she too was a Japanese. His father otherwise would never have received her unless she had been pure in her race. He wondered often whom he would have married if he had not met Hannah, and by what luck he had found her in the most casual way by chance, literally at an American professor's house. Now, you know, it was a chance meeting. Nothing was planned. And he was thinking to himself, he was thinking that had he not met Hannah, had they not fallen in love, then what would have happened to him? He wouldn't have married. Could be that he would have still been a bachelor. And you know, it's said like couples, they are destined to meet because it has already been fixed by God. So something like that, that it was already destined, and because they had to meet, even in the most casual situations, even in the most ordinary situations, by chance they met, and that too at an American professor's house. The professor and his wife had been kind people, anxious to do something for the new foreign students. Now the professor and the wife, they were in America, okay, and they wanted to help the foreign students, so they used to give them shelter, and the students, though bored, had accepted this kindness. Of course, in a foreign place, when you are receiving this hospitality, a roof over your head, and that too, such hosts who are kind enough to give you shelter, nobody would deny. Sadao had often told Hannah how nearly he had not gone to Professor Harley's house that night. You know, every time he used to tell Hannah, whenever they used to talk about their meeting, or whenever they used to fondly remember those good old days when they were studying together, Sadao would have had always told Hannah that that day he had no plans to come to Professor Harley's house. But then, because it was written that they had to meet, because it was already destined, he did come to Professor Harley's house that night. Otherwise, you know, he had no plans to come. Okay, let's move on to the next slide now. Children, see, if I am giving you a line by line explanation, you know, that essence gets lost. Nothing is difficult over here. Go through the rest of the chapter yourself also. Okay, like it was already said over here, children, that the students, they used to get bored at the professor's house, but then they accepted the hospitality and the kindness. The rooms, they were so small, the food so bad, the professor's wife so voluble and means talkative, but he had gone, and there he had found Hannah. You know, it's said that everything happens for good. So that day he did go to the professor's house, and there by chance he found Hannah, a new student, and had felt he would love her if it were at all possible. And he said that, you know, it came to his mind that yes, she's the girl for me. I can love her if at all it is possible to fall in love. If there is something like love that does exist, then yes, I can fall in love with this girl. Okay, children, I shall end my explanation here today. We shall continue this chapter in the next video lesson. Thank you.